Good evening, good morning. Welcome to week 2 for PSSL 6240, Political Violence and Terrorism at George Washington University. Welcome to the second week, and I just want to start off with a couple of announcements. First, Adobe Connect session this week, this Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I will send out a link for that. What's going to happen, the agenda for it is threefold. First, we're going to spend about 10-15 minutes introducing yourselves to the class. A lot of times in these distance learning classes, you don't see the person you're interacting with. And since you are going to be in the same cohort for the next couple of years, it might be a good idea to see, listen to, hear your fellow classmates. So that'll be, we'll talk about that. We'll do that for about 15 minutes. Then we'll spend 30 minutes or so debating the what is terrorism discussion section. In your discussion section for this week, you're going to talk about what's terrorism, what isn't terrorism, why we think this is terrorism while another action is not, and we'll go in depth on that, and we'll have debates on that for the next 30 minutes. And what I'm going to do is, based on what you say in your discussion sections, I will pick a few of you guys and I will say, hey, brief me on what you wrote about in your discussion section on Fort Hood shooting and terrorism, or the bombing of Dresden and terrorism. So write your discussion sections pretty well. So I'm going to kind of choose you, and I'll debate you guys on whether that should be terrorism or not. And what I'm going to do for the next 15 minutes of the Adobe Connect session is go over the paper, paper number 1. And one of the comments I always get when I teach this class previously is that we get kind of hung out to dry a little bit on the papers because it's a distance learning course. You get down, you don't know what to talk about on the papers, you don't know what the expectations are of the instructors, and I want to kind of spend 15 minutes going over what I see is important in papers, what I don't see, what problems I've had in the past, and how I kind of want your paper to be laid out. So I'll go in detail on that on Thursday. The Adobe Connect session will last an hour. If you can't make it, shoot me an email and let me know so I can send you kind of a link one-on-one to it so you can view it. You can't interact with it, but you can view it afterward. The second announcement, I just want to apologize again for the confusion about the group presentations during the Adobe Connect sessions. I thought it was a good idea. Above me apparently did not think it was a good idea, so we will go with normal papers. So for this class, you will be doing 3 papers, and you will be doing a final exam. Those will be your work products for that. I apologize again if there was confusion surrounding that. Third announcement, discussion sections for week 1. I thought they went pretty well. Good comments, very good in depth. But the one thing that was lacking that I think we need to improve on is you need to show me in the discussion sections that you read the readings, that you viewed the lectures. So please do so. Please make sure that you interact with the homework, with the readings or the lectures. Show me that you interacted, that you viewed them, and cite them in your lectures as well. You can agree with them, you can disagree with them, you can cite information from that, you can disagree with information that you saw in the readings. That's all part of the discussion section. That's fine, but you have to show me that you have actually done the readings and viewed the lectures as well. The fourth announcement, just travel next 2 weeks. I will be going overseas to the Middle East starting next Sunday. I should have internet connections. The one thing is I might be behind on grading some of your papers for week 3. I'm going for 2 weeks, part of work. Again, I should have internet connections, so if there's issues, I should be able to go back and forth over email. But I just want to give you a heads up that I will be traveling, so I'll be out of the loop for at least a little bit, and I might not be able to get to your emails or issues in a timely fashion. And the last announcement, I got a bunch of emails in the past couple of weeks, just as Sir, Professor Sharma. Just call me Rowan. That's my first name. I'm a very informal person, so please just call me Rowan and keep it informal from here on in. So those are kind of the announcements. Just talk about last week. Good comments overall, as I said earlier, for the terrorism and existentialism threat. Again, I think everyone kind of hit it. There was agreement and disagreement, and I think everyone kind of had good points around. Many people touched on areas that will be covered in the future, and that's good because that was the point of week one. In fact, week one will be kind of a thread that runs through the rest of the course. Is terrorism an existential threat? That's going to be a question that you're going to ask yourself when we talk about things like cost. A lot of you hit on that. Are we spending adequate enough money, or are we spending too much money on the terrorism threat? It's going to be important when we talk about interrogation techniques. If terrorism is an existential threat, then you can use, you at least are justified in using more enhanced interrogation techniques. If it is an existential threat, at least that's the theory. If it's not an existential threat, then you have to ask some hard questions on whether you're using the right interrogation techniques. When we talk about drones, I talk about drones in depth in later weeks, but we do things. We do extrajudicial killings in drone strikes against U.S. citizens. We don't do that for other people. We don't do that for child molesters or murderers. We only do it for terrorists. And if terrorism is an existential threat, then yeah, drones become more of a approved method in the war on terror. If it's not an existential threat, then again, we have to ask some hard questions. So again, the existential question kind of runs as a thread that kind of runs through the entire course. So keep that in the back of your mind as we pursue forward. And the last point I want to talk about in week one, deterrence and counterterrorism. And the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration, got beat up by quite a few of you guys during the past week. And full disclosure, I used to work for TSA, and actually I agree with a lot of the comments made that they're maybe a little too intrusive. The one question you have to think about, though, when we're spending all this money is the terrorists that we deter. So a lot of you brought up that the TSA hasn't caught a terrorist, and that's a true statement. There's not been a time where they've caught someone during the pat-down surges. But how many terrorists have been deterred? How many terrorists would have easily said, "Hey, I would have just snuck a bomb on a plane and blown it up, and I could have brought a lot of publicity to my cause, but I didn't do it because there's a guy patting me down, and there's airport scanners and dogs and all those things at the airports that we see." How much do we deter terrorists with those countermeasures we employ? So that's something you can't quantify. You can't say we spend $5 billion on TSA and we caught this many terrorists. You can't quantify that. You have to ask the question, how do we deter terrorists? How do we prevent them from doing these things? So that's, again, another thread that's going to go through the rest of the course is not just catching the terrorists, but deterring them from actually executing their course of action. So that kind of wraps up last week. Just preview into next week. We're going to talk about history. History. I love history. I love talking about history. Some of you might not have received a history class since you were in high school, and that's okay. But this will be your, if we're talking about terrorism, you can't divorce the terrorism we see now without talking about history in depth. And what you're going to be assigned is the 4 waves of terrorism, which is a very nice way that the terrorism problem over the last 100 years has been packaged. And you'll see that in the readings as well as the lectures as well. What the focus for the lectures will be on the anti-colonial terrorism after the Second World War. And there's going to be 2 groups, the Irgun in Israel and the FLN in Algeria, both, depending who you talk to, they're terrorists or they're freedom fighters. And that's kind of depends on, again, who you talk to. They fall under that category. And you're also going to see how organizations, these 2 organizations specifically, use the media to advance their political narratives. which became a hallmark of terrorism for the last 50 to 60 years. You're going to view the documentary One Day in September. Excellent documentary. I think it's certainly the best documentary on terrorism out there, and I think it's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, period. Just word of caution, it's a great flick. It's very entertaining, but it's not appropriate for young children. There is some footage in there that if you have children under 12, 13 years old, they shouldn't be viewing. We'll say that. So don't make it a family viewing event. But it is a great documentary. And one thing I want you to take away from is how the terrorists use media to advance their cause. And this One Day in September shows it really, really well. They manipulated public opinion. They chose the Olympics because they knew at the time that there was going to be cameras viewing the Olympic events. And that was the 72 Olympics in Munich were the first kind of live worldwide color television event, and they took advantage of that. And then you also see how the German authorities were incompetent in dealing with this threat in the 1972 Olympics. And hopefully one of the reasons you're in this program is to deal with areas of emergency management and political violence and counterterrorism, and you'll see an example of how incompetent that was. And then the second part, which is going to lead us into Adobe Connect session, is we're going to talk about why we consider certain things terrorists, other people not terrorists, definitions of terrorism, why certain definitions are wrong or inadequate, and a lot of this is subjective, which is part of the course. Why do we consider certain people terrorists and others not? Why do we consider certain acts terrorism and others not? And your paper is going to kind of dig deep on that section a little bit more. So with that being said, I look forward to your comments on the discussion sections, and if there's any issues or problems, please let me know.